How is everybody? I'm trying to work out how I can actually engage with people in the comments section. I'm not sure I've worked that out. In fact, I'm not even sure whether people are here watching. No idea. Just happily sitting here talking to myself. Quite like talking to myself, actually. I have full conversations. Just getting expert advice there. Anyway, good morning. The lighting is making me look like I have the measles. I can assure you I don't. I'm in my dining room because my children are at school and I have freedom. So I can go anywhere in the house I like. I am here to talk about PDA and children with extreme anxiety resisting writing. I've had a few emails about this and it pops up a lot because I understand that it can be difficult to understand why our children... Hi Alison, how are you? Why our children will not write. Some of our children, of course not all of them. So there are families who are raising children with a PDA profile, pathological demand avoidance, that will find that whilst their children may get in the flow with lots of other learning styles and engage with other things at school, like maybe art, or will be happy to sit on the mat and listen, they may refuse to write. And they may refuse to write at home as well. And I understand that some families have stresses around academic performance. And the first thing that I would say when raising a child with a PDA profile is it's always really important to challenge ourselves as parents and carers and educators to let go of our own agenda, our own motivations and intentions for our children when they have a PDA profile. Because with having a PDA profile comes this, underneath all of the behaviour and the resistance and the anxiety lies this powerful, forceful, innate, organic determination that is more powerful than any will I could ever possess to be free, to be exercising autonomy over ourselves, to have a sense of control over ourselves. And whilst it seems, and whilst our behaviour will demonstrate that we are grasping for extreme control of people, places and things outside of ourselves, again, underlying that is the PDA's extreme organic need to have as much control over ourselves as possible. This is not insubordination, it is not disrespect, it's not ego or pride, and it will often appear that way. It's something that we have very little control over. And in all honesty, being a PDAer, I can tell you that it's really difficult as a child to have this brain high-sated, to have this brain that we don't understand as children. So we're constantly in a position of being disapproved of being told off, of offending people, worrying people, and that's painful for us as children. So back to the writing. So my little person who is at school, I'm a parent to 3 children with pathological demand avoidance profile of autism. One of my girls went off to school this year adamant that she was never going to write. I'm never writing. I don't want to learn. No, I'm not going to learn. I'm not going to write. Now, I didn't make a big deal out of that. I mean, I've got 22 years experience with PDA, even though I didn't know what PDA was until a few years ago. enough experience to know that where we place our focus is where the demand avoidance will get stronger. So if we encourage a child who's saying no to something to engage with that very thing, they're going to dig their heels in, and the no is going to get harder and louder. So it's great to create some freedom and flexibility around that. Now, I know that many people will advise families of children who are PDAs to provide choices where there's resistance. Sometimes that's not enough, sometimes that's confusing. There will be children that respond well to that, but there will also be children that jerry on to the fact that we're still receiving a demand. Our brain's still processing, what do you want for breakfast, as an example, as a demand. What do you want for breakfast? Now, in the case where we give a child a choice at breakfast time and we say, you can have cereal or you can have toast, many children are likely going to say, I don't know. I don't know. Or I'm not ready for breakfast. Or I don't want breakfast. Or I'm doing this thing right now, I'll have breakfast later. Or they might say, I want cereal. And when we pop the cereal in front of them, they may say, I don't want that. No, I don't want that now. Because being given choices around what to eat is still a demand. We're still being told what we can eat. Even though we've been given a choice, we're not really being given a choice because we're still being told what to eat. The reason why we might resist writing in a classroom or at home is for a range of reasons. The first reason is perfectionism. If we don't know that we're going to be really, really great at something on the first go, sometimes we won't even try. Because what that will result in is an extreme loss of control in public. It will result in us being vulnerable, and vulnerability doesn't feel safe for the PDA brain. So, I witnessed in one of my children that they would look at the writing of other children, their peers in the classroom, and develop a belief that they would not be able to present the same quality of work. And they may not be able to because we're all different. Some of us write really neat, some of us are quite messy, and it doesn't really matter. We know that rationally it doesn't matter, but the PDA brain doesn't care about logic. Its job is to keep me safe. And the PDA brain is largely overactive and overreactive when it comes to the way that it keeps me safe. So this is the difference between a non-PDA and a PDA. The part of my brain that takes in information from my environment and assesses how much of a threat they are is overactive all of the time. So that's what kicks off the demand avoidance. And demands will be things that you'd never imagine would be demands. Asking a child what they want for breakfast, going back to that example. Another reason why we may not write is because, for me, in the classroom, there were certain times when I couldn't write. And of course, that will fluctuate all the time because our anxiety fluctuates. Our environments change in terms of how safe they feel. The people that we're with change, and connection and relationship with others is the one thing that will help us to be able to move through and get things done. But if we're in the space for somebody who's demanding or controlling is the worst thing of all, or somebody who relentlessly encourages us, well-intentioned, it's still a demand. So in a classroom where I couldn't write, sometimes it would be because writing can be a deeply personal expression of ourselves. And when I say this to parents, their first response will be, yeah, but it's not like we're asking them to write, a piece of poetry or an article about their personal experience. It doesn't matter. Remember, the PDA brain doesn't care about details. It doesn't care about logic or rationality. It cares about whether something is a threat or not. So if I'm being asked to write my alphabet, my brain perceives that as much of a threat or as unsafe as someone asking me to write about a traumatic event in my life. Writing is a deeply personal expression. It's like taking a piece of me inside here, putting it onto a piece of paper and giving it to you. Now, if you're an educator or an adult or someone that's working with us, and I do comply and I do get my schoolwork done and I write this thing on this piece of paper that you've asked me to write, do you know how much risk is involved with that? You might come along and correct it. Oh my God, this is the worst thing for a PDA. Being corrected, being told something's not good enough, being asked to do something again, having your work compared to something that's on the board, or being told to think about something differently or think about it again. Again, this is not about ego or pride. It's about a brain that's number one function is to protect us and to preserve our autonomy and our freedom as PDAs. So if I'm going to put myself in a classroom and I'm going to mask all day, and even when as PDAs we enjoy school, we're still masking. So if I'm going to do that all day, that's because I am preserving as much of my vulnerability, I am preserving as much of my autonomy, and I am preserving as much of my freedom as I possibly can in that space of the classroom or the home environment or wherever I am. And complying with an instruction to write or produce a piece of work through writing is a huge offer of giving you a large amount of my control, my autonomy, my freedom. Even if you give me a choice about what I write, you're still asking me to do something and it's still a demand. Demand, demand, demand. Anything that's not my idea is a demand. So if I produce that work and then you criticize it or correct it, the probability that I may not engage with that work again, or I may take years or a long time to do that again, is very high. Another reason is because I'm going blank right now. There were 3 reasons. The first one was perfectionism. The second one was it being showing us as being vulnerable. And I cannot remember the third reason, but that's okay. So when my child decided that she was never going to write at school, and she happily announced this and adamantly announced this, we said, okay, that's fine. You don't have to. You don't have to write at school. Because we can't, there's no gauging how much somebody knows by the amount they write or how well-rounded the circle is on their Ds, especially when it comes to autistic people. We, by nature, know and understand far more than we're able to communicate or express. So when you think about a child with a PDA profile, often we feel like we're adults trapped in children's bodies. And you might even hear children with a PDA profile regularly say, I don't want to be a kid. I want to be grown up. I want to be an adult. That's because we crave the same freedom and autonomy that adults seemingly have. There are other ways to work on literacy if that's something that's important. But again, I always encourage families to be transparent with your children and talk to them about what we're doing. Tricking them only enforces insecurity and a lack of trust, and interferes with them feeling safe to engage with anything that you want them to do in the future. So we would buy a light box. You can get a light box from the $2 shop. It's a white box with a switch on the side, and it comes with letters, and we would make words on the light box. Now, if your child puts swear words on there, or puts bum or penis or wee or dickhead or whatever they write on there, even though we might feel that's not ideal, they're still literacy skills. And if that's how we're learning, I want to tell you that that's okay. That's okay. It's on their terms. It's initiated by them. If they're having fun and enjoying it, then that's okay. Again, we will find ourselves in a position as being families of children with a PDA profile where we are challenged to let go of so much care around what's right and what's wrong and what others think we should be doing and whether others would approve. And I know families, again, are under a lot of stress from, school telling us that our children are behind. I always make it clear to our educators that that is not our priority. Academic achievement is not our priority. Well-being and sense of self and confidence and self-worth are always our priorities. The rest will come later. We'd use a light box. We'd make words. We might paint on the back windows and make words and then wash them off with a hose. We might draw on the concrete with chalk. We might get in the shower with paint or chalk, or you can buy bubble bath that you can write with, or soap. And we would make words in the shower and wash them off. You might get a plate with some chicken nuggets and some tomato sauce and write a word in the sauce for your child, or encourage them to do the same. Learning is supposed to be creative. It's okay, and it's supposed to be messy and fun and flexible. And education is supposed to be tailored to individual learning strengths. So whilst we're expecting our PDAs to comply and get on board with what's being taught in schools, there's no freedom in that. There's no autonomy. There's only control. And even when we're in a new learning pod with beanbags on the ground, the curriculum's the same. And so we're learning the same thing that everybody else is learning in the same way. PDAs thrive on being autodidactic, self-led in our learning. It's almost painful for us to be seen as taking in information from others that we haven't initiated ourselves, because again, that's an expression of vulnerability, and being vulnerable doesn't feel safe to us. So getting help with homework, it's infuriating and it's painful. And I remember what it felt like, and I know as a parent what it feels like to want to help our children and for them to say, no, I know how to do it. And we know they don't know how to do it. Sorry about that. But vulnerability is painful. Aside from that, there's sitting in a classroom and taking in information and paying attention and learning. I struggle with this as an adult. Sometimes I'd love to read a book that somebody's written about a particular area of knowledge. I'd love to go to a seminar and listen to a speaker. My PDA says no. It says flat out no. We're not going to put our bum on a seat and look in the direction of someone who's teaching about something. It doesn't feel safe. And I don't know why. I don't know why. But what I do know is that if I jump on the internet, if I initiate the learning myself, if I'm in my own space, if I'm free to learn in the way that I learn best, if I have the space and time to process, analyze, pick apart, criticize, reframe information, then I learn really well. But well-intentioned encouragement can cause the PDA to dig its heels in harder than ever. You know, an example of this is being in a classroom and getting to the point where we can engage with a writing task or some form of work, and then producing that content to an educator who will then say, as we're trained to do, "Good job." The first thing I would want to do in that instance is rip it up, crush it, throw it away. And the reason for that is because it has taken every ounce of energy to go against my PDA nature to comply with a learning activity that I have not initiated, to put myself in a position of being told what to do, to put myself in a position of vulnerability, and then to produce this work, not wanting to, but producing this work. When you say, "Good job," or "Well done," that's a reaffirmation or a confirmation that I've just lost. Because in a PDA brain, when we're children, there's winning and losing, or there's controlling or being controlled. And for somebody to respond to something I've done that they've told me to do with "good job" or "well done," it's almost like an instant reminder that I've just done something I really didn't want to do. And it's almost like my brain then ridicules me for doing it. I've gone against my nature and done something that doesn't feel natural and right and safe. I think it's really important to remember to separate the child from their PDA brain. I have positive autistic identity. I'm also very proud to be a PDAer, but I don't consider my PDA nature in the same way that I consider my non-PDA autistic nature. Not that I have one, but there are things that I cannot engage with because my PDA brain tells me it's not safe. And when it decides something is not safe or not right for me, there's nothing I can do to get around it. There are some cases where I can receive information that feels triggering, which means that my fight or flight has been triggered. I can sit with the discomfort of it. If I have the time to process that information, I can come back later and respond appropriately or make a decision around that. But when you're a little person and you have very little understanding or knowledge of how your brain works, if your life from the time you wake up till the time you go to bed is a cesspool of demands, and this is for everybody in the world, because when we're children, we're taking instructions from our parents, from our educators, from other people. When we're contending with that as PDAs all of the time, then realistically, we're being asked to go against our very nature. We're being asked to engage with things that don't feel safe all of the time, all of the time. And so when we look at it from that perspective, then we can understand why, when a child comes home from school with a PDA brain, that they might be aggressive, exhausted, not want to talk about how their day was. I'm in my safe space now. I just want to let go. I just want to lock myself in my room with my screen and regulate. I just want to be me. I just want autonomy. I just want control. I don't want to talk to anybody. And this will be the case for a lot of our kids. And there are really good reasons why it's important for our children to have some time in the day where there's no demands, where they're not being asked any questions, even well-intentioned questions, because sometimes I'm dying to know things about my child's day. I want to ask lots of questions, but I have to come to a space within myself where I create flexibility at every opportunity. Does anybody have any questions before I finish up? I can't believe I've been talking for 25 minutes. Wow. I exhaust myself, honestly. Okay. I'm going to finish up there. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks for being here. Ciao.